Today I'm going to do some refactoring. I want to change the collaboration between two objects where right now one queries the other to the Hollywood principle, which basically says, don't call us, we call you. Hello, my name is David, and for the past 2 decades I worked as a software developer, as a software architect, and I've also helped my clients create better software faster as a trainer and as a technically agile coach. Right now I'm developing a little console application just as an exercise for myself to get familiar with a certain problem that I later want to solve using different programming languages. Let me quickly show you. This is an application that later should display the current time in different time zones. Right now it only displays my time zone, which is Europe Vienna, and it doesn't even react to changes of the terminal size correctly yet. It doesn't have any listeners for that yet. So this is basically my walking skeleton. And while I created it, I also created a little bit of a mess. I developed it using test-driven development, and I did refactor every time the tests were green. Otherwise, it wouldn't be test-driven development. But there were some parts of the design where I was not super happy with it yet. But I postponed the bigger refactorings because I wanted to have a working skeleton first. And I wanted to make sure that my idea of how to render one of those lines works before doing some bigger refactorings and before thinking more about the design. You may or may not approve of this decision to postpone some design decisions until we have a working skeleton, but here we are. We have a mess, but it's still a small mess, and now it's time to clean it up. And one of the parts where I'm not super happy with it yet is how this model controller interacts with this wall clock. So the model controller creates a model which contains the current time, the user time zone, and all other time zones that should be displayed. And it passes this on to later processing, to another object. But to get the time and the user time zone, it asks the wall clock, which is right now just an abstraction over the Java time functionality to make it more testable. But as it is right now, I cannot really use it to add more functionality to it. And I think it would be nicer if this wall clock would call back the controller every time something did change, and then it would update the model and restart the processing. Also, I think that the user time zone that is shown in the first line should not come from the wall clock, because maybe we don't want to display the user time zone as first line, but some arbitrary time zone that can be passed in via a command line argument. So those are the two refactorings I want to do here. I want to remove the user time zone from the wall clock, and I want to invert this relationship between the two objects. Before I do anything here, let's run the tests. And you can see we have 39 tests. One of them is an integration test, which really sets up the whole program except for the terminal and the wall clock, and then runs everything and checks the final output. So this is a very coarse-grained test that just makes sure that everything is wired up correctly. And then we have 38 real unit tests that are more or less isolated. And with this safety net of tests, I can start to refactor. So here I said we get the current time zone from the clock, and I don't like that anymore. I want to change this design decision. And the first thing I do here is extract a variable. And I'm always using this refactor this menu now in this video, which is Control-Alt-Shift-T, so you can see what I do. So I want to introduce a variable here, and user time zone is okay, and the test should still be green. I'm gonna run the tests after most refactorings, but not necessarily after all automated refactorings, because those usually work. The next thing I want to do here is I want to move this to a field, which I probably could have done in one step. And since we are already in the constructor, I should now be able to lift this to a constructor parameter. Are the tests still running? Yes, they are. I don't like the fact that this is called user time zone 1. So let's change this here and here, rename this to user time zone. And the tests are still running. And what we should see here now is that where we create the controller, we at this point here we call clock.timezone and not in the controller anymore. And now we can change it. So let's see here where it is used. So here you can see that we're just using it once in the main production code and once in the test. So this should be easy. So here we can inline the method. And I want to inline all usages and remove the method. Now we don't have any references anymore here, and the wall clock doesn't have the method anymore. And the tests are still green, and that's something I can already commit here. So now I can start with the bigger task, which is inverting the relationship between wall clock and model controller. And for this, I first need some new functionality in wall clock, and I want to create this in a test-driven way first. So let's open the wall clock tests, and I want to test that so before I want to implement something where the time changes and then the wall clock notifies all the listeners, I want to notify any listener that I'm registering to the wall clock of the current time. So here I want to do something like clock.on time changed. And I want to pass in the listener that gets some time and stores it so that we can later assert it. And now I can create this method. On time changed gets a consumer of instant. And then I assert that. Well, I don't like this assertion, but let's roll with it right now. And now we have one test failure, which is actual should not be null. That's okay, but I already have another subclass of wall clock, a testable wall clock. So let's use the test wall clock here. Why doesn't this work? Because it's called test clock. Yeah, of course. And I can instantiate this test clock with an instance. So let's take one, any instant, and then I don't want to check is close to, but it is equal to expected. So that's better. And it still fails because we still got null back from the wall clock. Or we didn't get it back. We didn't get it back, the wall clock never called the listener. So let's implement this. It's really just for now listener.accept now. And since the test wall clock overrides now, this should already work. Yes, all tests are green. I'm done with the wall clock here. So let's now move to the model controller. The model controller here updates its display model controller. That's a bad name. That's a refactoring for the next video. Just ignore it for now. It updates it in the constructor, and when we later don't have the wall clock in the constructor anymore, we should update it in something like an update method, like so. And we'll move this down here, and I'm just gonna show you that this will cause some problems. Let's bind this to a field. Yeah, why not all of them? And by the way, we should assert that the use time zone is not null here, just to be safe. So with this change, let's run the tests again. We see here that a lot of tests have failed. And I don't like this, that for a single small change, which was, remember the change was just moving this line here from the constructor to the update method, that for a single small change, so many tests fail. It's 28 tests. It's okay that the integration test fails because the integration doesn't work anymore. And it's okay that one of those tests here fails, but it's not okay that it's 27 of them. So let's undo this change for now and try to make that better. So I want to go into the model controller test. I want to add another test because I'm missing a test here. All those tests here are checking what happens after the display model controller was notified. But there's no test that tests the basic fact that the display model controller should be notified at all. So I'm just gonna add one more test. And let's call this notifies display model controller after initial update, and it just asserts that the model is not null. So now we have 41 passed tests, and let's quickly break this test so that we can see that it can actually break. So here you can see that this test can fail when we don't notify the display model controller, and that it also fails with a reasonable error message. So let's undo this. Now all the tests are green again. And now I'm gonna add an assumption to the other tests. Which basically tells the assertion framework that if this assumption is not met, then I don't care about the result of the test, because it will just be an error that is linked to the other error. So let's do this for all tests here. This should not change anything about the test results. Now we can try what happens when we don't notify the controller again. And now we only have two failed tests. That one says that the controller was not notified at all. So we are not interested in all the tests that test what happens after the notification, because it didn't happen, and the integration test fails. And that's the state I want to have here before I really start the refactoring. So I undid my change, tests are green again. And now we'll have to do the heavy lifting, which is actually not that heavy. Right now the notification is in the constructor, so let's just check where the constructor is called. So we have one here, and the idea is that I want to do something like that here. Clock.onTimeChanged. And this is controller update. Doesn't work because we don't have the update method in. We don't have the correct update method here in this class. So we want to create something like that. So this should not change anything about the test because I'm calling a method that doesn't do anything. And now we should use the same thing in the tests, where there's also just a single point where I'm creating this controller. Also, this create controller function is also not ideal yet. It's also some refactoring for a later video. But right now, we just want to do something like the test clock onTimeChanged controller.update, which still won't change anything. And now if I go back to the model controller, I should be able to move this down here, and the test should still be green. But this is not correct yet. We still have to remove the clock from the constructor and use the instant that is passed in here now. And I think I want to have a test for that. So the simplest way to write this test is uses instance of instant from update instead of past test clock. And then I want to inline this here. Did I just do the wrong thing? Yes. So inline method, and I want to inline only this usage. So better, because all the other methods can still use the create controller function, but here I want to have some more control. So here I can replace this with a lambda, but that doesn't really matter. And I want to add another wall clock here that has any time, don't care which, and here we pass in an instant that we know and that is definitely in the past. So I'm just gonna find one. Let's use this one. This looks nice. And this is definitely in the past. So now we should have this assertion. We want the current time to be what the test clock said and not what the wall clock said. And this, of course, didn't work because the model controller is using the clock here and not the instant. So let's use the instant. Now the tests pass again, and now we can remove this parameter and the field. So the question is it still used? Probably not. So let's remove the field. The tests are still green. Now I should be able to remove the parameter. Save deleted, and the refactoring is done. So now this test is not strictly necessary anymore, but I will keep it here anyway. No, I will not keep it because it's the same test as this now, since we only have one clock anymore and not two. So I can now remove this test again. And after removing this test, I have 41 tests passing. Oh, before we wrap this up, I'm not super happy with this name yet. because time changed could be the nanoseconds have changed or the hours have changed. So I want to quickly rename this to on minute changed, because my program only shows the minute, so it's also only interested in changes of the minute. Since we didn't implement the changing yet, this doesn't make a big difference, but I think that names matter and it's better like that. Let's quickly run the tests again, and then I'm gonna commit and push to Codeberg, and I will link the Codeberg repository in the description. So today I did 2 refactorings, and both had to do with how I implemented the wall clock and how the wall clock interacts with the model controller of my small console application. The first one was that I now was of the opinion that the user's time zone should not be part of the wall clock, because the wall clock should just run in UTC and we can supply any time zone as the user's time zone. And the other change was that I was not super happy with the fact that the controller was asking the wall clock for the time. So I inverted this relationship, made the controller a listener for clock changes, and now we have the Hollywood principle implemented for the wall clock, which says, don't call us, we call you. My name is David, and if you're interested in content like this, please subscribe to this channel and also activate notifications so that you don't miss any videos in the future. And please also press the like button. That really helps me a lot with the algorithm. What would you have done differently, or which decisions do you not agree with? Please tell me in the comments. Also, if you think that all of what I did here was overkill, then please add a comment and tell me why. And I also have another series on this channel where I talk about software development in general, and I usually work on my bonsai trees while I'm talking. So until next time, happy coding!